All right, let's get right into it. We're going to tackle one of crypto's biggest, most fascinating paradoxes. You've got this technology that promises a totally decentralized future, right? But here's the twist. It's becoming incredibly dependent on some of the world's oldest, dirtiest, and most centralized sources of power. It's a classic story of futuristic innovation running headfirst into a very real-world energy problem.
I mean, think about that for a second. It's a wild question, isn't it? We picture crypto as the sleek, digital frontier. But under the hood, its very foundation is creating this massive physical world demand for energy. And a lot of that energy is coming from old-school, polluting sources. This is the great crypto paradox we're going to unpack.
So, just how big of a problem are we talking about? Well, a recent study from the National Institutes of Health put a number on it. And wow, in just 1 year, the 34 biggest Bitcoin mines in the US alone devoured a staggering 32.3 terawatt-hours of electricity. To give you some perspective, that's a full 33% more power than the entire city of Los Angeles uses in a whole year, just from 34 mining operations.
So you've got to be asking, how on earth does a digital currency manage to use more power than a major city? Well, the answer isn't really about the transactions themselves. It's all about the revolutionary and incredibly energy-hungry technology that keeps the whole system secure in the first place. Okay, so at the very core of any blockchain is something called a consensus mechanism. Think of it as the digital rulebook. In a network where there's no central boss like a bank, you need a way for everyone to agree on what's true. This mechanism is what builds trust in a so-called trustless system, a system where you don't actually have to know or trust any single person to know the whole thing is secure. But here's the thing, there isn't just one rulebook, and the choice of which one a cryptocurrency uses is at the absolute heart of this whole energy debate. It really all comes down to two main competing methods. You've got proof of work and you've got proof of stake. So what's the real difference between the two? Let's break down these competing philosophies because they're fundamentally different approaches to the same problem. One relies on raw, brute force computing power, and the other? It relies on economic capital. These analogies really nail it. Proof of work, which is what powers Bitcoin, is basically a massive worldwide race. Computers everywhere are frantically trying to solve a super complex math puzzle. The winner gets to add the next block of transactions to the chain and gets a reward. Proof of stake, though, is totally different. There's no race. Instead, people lock up their own crypto as collateral, that's their stake, for a chance to be chosen to validate transactions. Their own money is literally on the line, which is a pretty powerful incentive, to be honest.
And this table really lays it all out. With proof of work, you've got miners. They need warehouses full of powerful, expensive hardware that just chugs electricity. The security is based on the fact that it would cost an insane amount of money for an attacker to buy enough hardware and power to take over. But with proof of stake, you have validators. They just need to own and stake the crypto. It's way more energy efficient, and the security comes from economic risk. If a validator tries to cheat, they can have their staked coins taken away.
Now, this high-energy model of proof of work isn't just some abstract problem on a whiteboard. It has very real, very serious consequences. That NIH study we talked about earlier, it actually went out and measured the environmental damage right here in the US.
And the findings are frankly pretty shocking. Not only did these mines use a ton of power, but a whopping 85% of that power came from fossil fuels. This created huge amounts of what's called PM2.5. These are tiny, really harmful particles in the air, which the study estimates affected nearly 2 million Americans. And here's the real kicker. The pollution didn't just hang around the mines.
The study was even able to name names, pinpointing the specific operations causing the most pollution. The top three, when you look at the PM2.5 emissions they were responsible for, were mines run by Core Scientific in Kentucky, Riot Digital in Texas, and Viking in Ohio. These are the specific operations that are having the biggest impact on environmental health. Now this is a super important point. A mine's insane demand for electricity can force a power plant hundreds of miles away to ramp up and burn more fossil fuels. So, for example, a mine in a rural part of Texas was found to be increasing pollution that then drifted all the way to downtown Houston. Same story up north. Mines in upstate New York were linked to worse air quality down in New York City. The impact spreads way beyond the mine itself. The researchers' conclusion is just stark. They basically say that this massive, totally unregulated demand for power is actively working against our efforts to fight climate change. Why? Because it creates this powerful economic reason to keep the country's dirtiest, oldest power plants up and running.
So, if proof of work is the problem, could proof of stake be the solution? Let's take a look at the promise of this much greener alternative.
The big promise of staking, and of networks like Ethereum, which famously made the switch, is that you can have robust, powerful security for a blockchain, but without that massive carbon footprint. It's really being presented as the sustainable path forward for the entire industry.
And you have to admit, the advantages are pretty compelling. The energy savings are just enormous. We're talking reductions of over 99%. It also makes it easier for regular people to participate, because you don't need a warehouse full of specialized computers, you just need to own the crypto. And the security model is really clever. To attack the network, you'd have to own more than half of all the crypto being staked, which would be astronomically expensive. And even if you tried, the network could just vote to destroy your funds.
But, it's not a silver bullet. Critics are quick to point out that since staking power comes from owning coins, the rich can get richer, and that could lead to the network becoming more centralized over time. There are also unique technical challenges, like the nothing at stake problem, where validators could, in theory, support multiple competing versions of the blockchain without any penalty, which could create chaos. And there's also the very real risk that a simple software bug could cause your staked coins to be automatically destroyed, a process they call slashing.
With stakes this high, both financially and for the environment, it is absolutely no surprise that governments and regulators all over the world are now paying very, very close attention to this technological choice. Over in Europe, they've taken a really broad approach. They recently implemented something called MiCA, which is basically a comprehensive, one-size-fits-all rulebook for the entire crypto industry. The goal is to create one clear set of standards across the whole EU to protect consumers and keep the market stable.
The US, on the other hand, is moving a bit more cautiously, but the path forward is starting to become clearer. The whole industry is watching for key developments, like what the new SEC Crypto Task Force comes up with. But a really critical step would be clear guidance on whether staking is considered a security or not. The ultimate goal here is to get agencies like the SEC and CFTC to work together and create some clear, consistent rules for everyone.
And honestly, that kind of regulatory clarity would be a huge deal. A clear statement from the SEC that lays out the legal framework for staking would be like a giant green light for US companies and investors. It would remove this massive cloud of uncertainty that's been hanging over everything, and it could really pave the way for a much wider adoption of proof-of-stake networks.
Which of course brings us right back to that core dilemma. This is often called the blockchain trilemma. It's the massive challenge of trying to achieve security, decentralization, and sustainability all at the same time. The choice between proof of work and proof of stake really just represents two very different bets on how to solve that puzzle. One bets on raw power, the other on economic incentives. And you know what? The entire future of crypto might just depend on which of those bets pays off.